style of debate in which the Seawolf debate team competes intercollegiately. It's also the style of debate that you're going to see tonight. A couple of hallmarks about that style of debate. The first is that it's like any other debate. You've got one side arguing for the motion. That would be these folks on the proposition. You've got the other side arguing against the motion. These four people are on the opposition. Each one of those people gets 1 7-minute speech will be given to the speaker from the proposition, alternate back and forth between the proposition and the opposition until each of these debaters has had their 1 7-minute speech. During that speech, you're going to hear a series of bells. They sound like this. Those bells indicate that points of information either are or are not allowed. So the first bell you'll hear is after the first minute of each speech. You'll hear another bell before the last minute of each speech. In that intervening 5 minutes, those points of information are allowed. Points of information are brief interruptions from the opposing side. So here, for example, the primary speaker, someone from the proposition, is giving his 7-minute speech about why the proposition is true. Any member from the opposition can rise to ask a point of information. That's a brief interjection in the form of a question or an argument that challenges something that the speaker is currently making an argument about. Keep in mind that points of information are entirely at the discretion of the speaker holding the floor, so the person who wants to ask a point of information needs to request permission to do so. That means you're likely to see that primary speaker saying, not at this time, or I'll get to you later, or just waving the person down. They're not being rude. We're evaluating them in part upon how well they manage their time and how well they interact with their opponents. If they surrender their time to that person to ask a point of information, then that speaker has about 15 seconds to phrase that question or to make that argument. They'll sit back down. The primary speaker continues with his or her speech and addresses the issues raised in that point of information in the context of their speech. Another hallmark of British parliamentary debate is that we love audience interaction. The way that we traditionally do this is to pound on something and say, here, here. We do this when you want to support an argument, when you find some piece of evidence that's particularly compelling, when some position that the debater articulates resonates with you. It's a good time to practice that now so you don't feel uncomfortable. For that, I appreciate it. By all means, let the debaters know that you support and appreciate them. That makes their experience a lot more enjoyable and gets the entire audience involved in the debate. The motion for this evening's debate is that Marco Rubio would make a better Republican candidate for the presidency than either Ted Cruz or Donald Trump. Had we waited a week to phrase this motion, we might have inquired as to whether or not John Kasich would have done it as well. But nonetheless, it was after Iowa. We went with Marco Rubio, even though we ended up, what, 5th? 6th? 5th. Anyway, I am pleased to have this debate shared by a panel of esteemed debaters from the Seawolf debate program and chaired, I believe, by Joanna Richter. Fantastic. Our Speaker of the House tonight will be Matthew Ostrander. I will turn it over to him now and ask him to call the House to order.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. I'd like to call the House to order on the motion that Steve just said. Joining Joanna on this lovely panel are Catherine Casello, Kaylee Mino, Robert Akama, and Nick Tabachka. So, at this time, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister, Tony Hu from D.C., to open the case for the government bench. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, your judges, today we're up here to talk about 3 people. Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. Coming in first is Donald Trump. He has been mandating the media. He's been capable. The things he says resonates with some of the American people, and a lot of people feel strongly upon it. Coming in second is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is actually intelligent, cunning, and smart. His strategic campaigning skills is on point and has been behind Donald Trump to this time, which is very impressive to the Republicans' eyes. Coming in third is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is kind of an underdog. Not many people, some people don't even know who he is. But let me tell you otherwise. Marco Rubio is the best candidate for the Republican Party for presidency than Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Let me tell you why. I have 2 points. My first point is that Marco Rubio is someone that the Republican Party can stand behind 100% and support. He's not a person that, hey, I understand we nominated this candidate, but we don't agree with everything he says towards your ethnicity. He's not someone that's going to drive a rift in your party. Marco Rubio is a person that all Republicans can stand by. He follows the 10 values of the Republican Party. Let me tell you what those 10 values are real quick. Lower taxes, small government, encourage the growth of business, sanctity of human life, protecting traditional marriage, support the right to keep and bear arms, safeguarding the religious liberties, ensuring equal treatment for all people, freedom of speech and of press, and strengthening our military. I understand that not every one of you agrees with these, but these are the values that the Republican Party supports and stands by first. And we need a candidate, a nominee, that's going to stand by these values 100%. I understand that some of these candidates, not at this time, I understand that some of these candidates actually resonate with some of these values, and I understand they resonate with most of these values. But Mark Rubio resonates with all these values 100%. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark Rubio. He is a man of faith, a man of religion. He stands firmly on traditional marriage. He stands firmly on pro-life or abortion. He is all about strengthening our military. Alright, on to my second point. My second point will address the more common sense part about the election. It is about the capability of winning the general election. The capability of winning the general election against Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Let me talk about Ted Cruz real quick. Ted Cruz is kind of perceived as abrasive, sneaky, and arrogant in personality. That's backed up by his demeanor and the accusations that Donald Trump throws towards him about his legitimacy in birth and the underhanded tricks that he used in his campaign strategies. He does not appeal to the broader public. He appeals to the Tea Party, and that is not what you want in a general election. You want someone that can appeal to the broader and general public. All right, on to Donald Trump. Let me talk about Donald Trump. He's actually a very good candidate for presidency. But let me tell you something. Donald Trump is uncontrollable. He is unpredictable. The Republican Party does not and cannot hold him accountable for anything he does. That means Donald Trump is a one-man person. When you talk about Republican Party, it's a group. It's a group effort to lead a country. It's not a single person leading a country. It means you have everybody in the party backing you up 100% and supporting you to become president of the United States of America. That is why Mark Rubio is the best choice. I'm sorry, not this time. Mark Rubio has 3 good cards that plays in his favor. The first card is that he's from Florida. What that means is Florida is a swing state. Donald Trump comes from New York, which is a solid blue state. Ted Cruz comes from Texas, which is a solid red state. So no matter how much they campaign, they will not have, the votes are already set in stone. But Florida is in control of 29 electoral votes. Compared to Alaska, we only have 3 electoral votes. That's pretty big. That's really big, actually. And that's really vital. The second card he holds is that he's Hispanic. He's Hispanic. And, I understand that Donald Trump has riled up this ethnicity very, very highly. And that you can expect a high voter turnout for this ethnicity to vote. And then if Mark Rubio is to be nominated, he can persuade and appeal to these people. Otherwise they would vote for the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party does not want that. The third card he holds is that he is moderate, he is young, he is determined, and he has passion. All right. Since 1992, the young person, usually in the general election, has been winning every single election year. Ever since 1992. You can check me on that. And also, being a moderate is big because you want a person that can appeal to the broad public, not just a certain public. You don't want someone that can appeal just to the Tea Party or to Donald Trump appeals to I don't want to say this, but everybody hates him except the people that are kind of racist, all right? To conclude my point, we want a candidate that is capable of having the Republican Party back them 100%. Someone that understands the value of the Republican Party. Someone that can have the support of everybody 100%. You don't want someone that's gonna kind of hold a rip But you don't want a person that leads by himself. You want a person that can lead as a group, the party of the Republican Party. And the best candidate is Mark Rubio. He is capable of winning the general election, beating Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And that is important. And that's why I believe Mark Rubio will be the President of the United States of America and the best candidate for the Republican Party. Thank you.
We thank the Prime Minister and now invite the leader of the opposition, Aidan Buckman, from the Canadians, to open the case for their side of the House. Here it is.
Thank you for your opening speech, and I would like to say that I actually agree with a lot of what you said. Marco Rubio is the most electable candidate. He does have the best chance of beating Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, and does follow a Republican Party line. However, our clash here is not who is the most likely to win the general election, who is the best Republican in that sense. Our clash here is who should be president. My partner and I, we're Democrats. We define the best Republican nominee, the one out of these three, as the one who's most likely to lose. In our eyes, the best Republican nominee is the one who's not going to beat either Clinton or Trump or Sanders. And so our clash here is in a value. We value a Democratic president over a Republican president, and as it's made obvious in this first speech, they value a Republican president. So we have to, therefore, as we said, the best candidate is the one who's probably going to lose the presidency. Rubio is supported by the Republican establishment. Rubio is well liked by the Republican establishment. That's who they want for president, since Jeb Bush is obviously not going to make it. He's supported by moderates. He's supported by Latino voters. He is the most electable Republican. He went over this speech very well. He did my job for me. And I can see that completely. And Cruz and Trump are very rational. They appeal only to hardliners. Trump's a racist. Cruz shut down the government. Republicans don't even like him. Bernie Sanders himself has been quoted as saying, and I quote him here, "I want Trump to win the Republican primary, and I would love the opportunity to run against him. I think we'd win by a lot."
I believe the motion is why Mark Rubio would make a better Republican candidate for presidency than even Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. And I want to point that a Republican candidate, the best Republican candidate would be someone that could win the presidency.
So that's the clash here. The wording of the resolution, Mark Rubio would make a better Republican candidate. The key here is how you define a better Republican candidate. And they define it as the Republican candidate who's most likely to win. We define it as the Republican candidate who's most likely to lose. It all depends on how you define the better candidate. And so that's why our value clash is today. Now, in order for this point that I'm making to stand, I have to prove to you guys that it is better to have a Democratic president than a Republican president. Yes?
Yeah, so even at the point that you're going to concede that Donald Trump is horribly awful and all that, and you don't want to get elected, you're still playing with fire by making him the candidate.
I agree with you there. There is a risk. We'll address that later. Okay. But in order for our value of Democratic president to stand, we have to tell you guys why we think a Democratic president will be better than a Republican. And so to start, we have our three candidates: Rubio, Cruz, and Trump on the Republican side. They're all kind of terrible, right? Rubio he's the most electable candidate, he's the most moderate candidate, but he's still pretty bad. He has the worst attendance in the Senate of any Republican senator. He doesn't show up. He shows up the least of any Republican. He denies that climate change is man-made. He is completely opposed to gay marriage and wants to deny the LGBT community basic human rights. And he's against abortion even in the case of rape and incest. That's pretty bad stuff. Ted Cruz is considered directly responsible for the 2013 government shutdown, something that's gotten pretty hated by the Republican establishment. He is very anti-abortion, very anti-gay marriage, and he denies that climate change exists completely. On Donald Trump, we get him wanting to deport immigrants. He wants to put labels on Muslim like Nazi. And he's also disliked by the Republican establishment because he's not a politician. And he thinks that global warming is a Chinese conspiracy, going all the way up there. And so we see that they're not people that you want to have elected. And I'm not necessarily going to say
said that he wouldn't want to change law. Just because he believes that doesn't mean that he's going to change the Supreme Court decision. It's already made, and he says that's the law. He just has his own opinion about
Well,
it. Same thing with abortion. He says that he has this belief about abortion, but he says that any kind of
Well, on that, it's true that he can't change the Supreme Court decision because he literally cannot change the Supreme Court decision. He doesn't have the authority to do that. But he can still do things like support defunding Planned Parenthood and things like that, ways of less directly influencing gay marriage decisions and abortion. And so we can see that Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, we don't want any of these people as president. And I would much rather have Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. Personally, I feel the burn. So we, therefore, as we said, we value the worst Republican candidate in the sense that worst means most likely to lose. Yes.
Boris obviously expressed the point of playing with fire.
Yes. So there is a chance that Ted Cruz or Donald Trump could win the presidency if they win the nomination. That is true. I think this is very unlikely, though. Look at, for example, Ross Perot, another businessman who wanted to run for president, and at one point was considered the most favorable candidate, and then he sort of fizzled out. So Donald Trump's going to do the same thing. People are going to lose interest in him, and if he is elected, he's going to completely lose the moderate vote, and they're going to go over to the left. Same with Ted Cruz. He has no support from the moderates. He doesn't have much support from the Republican Party, and he's really pretty. It's a slim chance of him winning. And even if they do win, I think that their extreme stances that are completely, pretty much not supported by the Republican Party are going to mean that they don't really get much done. They can't actually do much harm. They're going to do whatever they can, but not a huge amount. And that it's going to drive people to the polls. It's going to make people vote Democrat. It's going to make people get involved and not support their policies. And I think it's that one term or 1 year of Trump or Cruz as president is going to make people realize that they made a big mistake, essentially. Thank you.
We thank the leader of the opposition, like Don Harnett, the deputy president of the communications profession. Here, here.
I'd like to bring this discussion back to what the question was actually trying to say. They tried really hard to reframe the question because they already knew that they probably weren't going to win. They probably think they're clever for being known, but they're really the only ones that thought of this meaning in this question. The clear meaning that this question was trying to ask was who would be the best president to win the general election against Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. Now, so I'm going to bring back the discussion. So these are the reasons why I'm going to go to the reasons why Donald Trump can't win, why Ted Cruz can't win, and why Marco Rubio could win. Some reasons why Donald Trump couldn't win is that one of his big campaign slogans is that he's funding his own campaign. Now, when you get to a general election, because right now they're focusing their money on these primary states. When they get to a general election, you have to campaign to the entire nation, which costs a lot of money, sometimes billions. Last election cost billions of dollars. They've said that Hillary Clinton has said that she's willing to spend up to $3 billion on that campaign. That's almost Donald Trump's entire net worth. So he's not going to, and a lot of that is tied up in assets. He's not going to sell his assets to fund his campaign. So if he's actually going to win a general election, he would have to break his promise of funding himself. There's no way he can fund a general election. Secondly, he has a limited demographic Many people expect someone that's going to be presidential. When you get to the election, will is helpful in what they say. Now, why Ted Cruz couldn't win the general election? Big elephant with this one is he was born in Canada. So even if he did win the primary, got the election, you already know that Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton are going to bring it up. And it's going to be a big thing. It'll be one of those things that he'll have to constantly talk about, constantly ask. The issues that he's about we push to the side. So that's one reason. He's also very far to the right. He's not considered a moderate by any standards. And so that's why he's doing so well right now in the primaries, because the primaries are just appealing to the Republican bloc voters. They're not appealing to the general bloc voters, what you get, what you need to win the election. He's also very unlikable. He's not very likable. He's like one of those people that you feel like when you shake their hand, it's going to be like slimy or
But being disliked in Washington to many Republicans is a compliment. It is a strength. It's much better to be opposing the Capitol like Rubio.
he's not disliked. He is disliked by government, but he's disliked by everyone. So it's not those are, I mean, he's just too far to the right. That's my main point of that he wouldn't win the general election for that. Now, the reason why Mark Rubio would have a better chance. First of all, he's Latino, he's young, he's good looking. And the younger voter has always wanted the election, by hard to say.
Do you really want to base your next presidential candidate off of looks? Are we really that shallow of a nation that we...
That's a good point. And everyone would like to think that they're basing their vote on the issues that the candidate is about. But if you really think about it, there are people out there, especially in a general election, that do vote on these things. They vote maybe people vote Donald Trump because they like the fact that he's rich and he's powerful. People want him to be rich. That's what they're voting for. People like the fact that they're voting for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. You know, they're not voting. There's a lot of people that vote not on Margaret was also a compromiser. Very important in Washington, especially in the bipartisan time. You want someone that can bring the parties together. He has a very strong stance on a lot of issues, but he's always said that he's always willing to compromise. Gang of 8 bill. This is a bill about immigration. This is one bill where a lot of Republicans think that he abandoned the party. Well, no, he wasn't abandoning the party. He was just trying to bring the party up and bring them up to time and he was trying to compromise the Democrats. It just shows his compromising skills. It never passed, and the Gang of 8 bill never passed, but he was also willing to learn from his mistakes. He was willing to say that, no, it didn't pass, and these are the reasons why, and these are the steps we're going to take first before we try to pass this bill. Another point. So he's from Florida. It's a state that Republicans need in order to win a general election. And that's what the whole point of this question is, again, is who can win a general election? Who can beat Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton? So, in order for Republicans to win, they need Florida. He also has the ability to unify the GOP. Now, remember this, GOP has lots of factions. A lot of different factions in the GOP party. There's the Tea Party, there's those who are right, and there's more moderate GOPs, and there's people that are in the middle that they consider them as moderate conservatives. And it's a saying that Democrats fall in love with the candidate, but Republicans fall in line with the candidate. So, and he has the ability to get Republicans to fall in line and vote for him in November. He covers all the bases. He's also very experienced in foreign policy. And this election cycle, foreign policy, if you pay attention to the news, it's going to be big in this election cycle. He is on the foreign policy, he's part of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So he deals with foreign relations a lot. This is what he does. So he has more experience than Ted Cruz and Donald Trump combined in political and foreign policy experience. Now, my last point is that, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz might appeal to the base bloc. They might actually be better presidents than Marco Rubio, but they can never be a better president if they never get the chance to become president.
candidates would be the ones who are most likely lose. Now, none of these candidates, in our opinion, should be president. I mean, if you look at any of these, Rubio, he has a relatively modest record in the Senate, and any of his so-called reforms that he has proposed have not passed. Do we really want a president who can't even pass his own reforms? Not now. Now, not only that, he's also biased. That's something that they lack to, they failed to bring up. His tax reforms that they brought up, his tax cuts, you know who they benefit? They benefit Republicans, the affluential, and wealthy business owners. Where do the middle class and the lower class come in this reform? Please explain to me that. Not only that, he's not able to unite the Republicans as they so claim 100%. He's not as influential as inclusive as Bush. He's not as aggressive as Cruz. In fact, he lacks a lot of major political skills that people in his who have been around in the Senate longer seem to already have a grasp on. Now, of course, we shouldn't have Cruz as a president either. I mean, look at the guy. He's anti-abortion, he's anti-gay. These are basic human rights. You should have the right to marry who you want. Isn't that what this country of freedom was built upon? You should have a right to choose what you do with your body. So Ted Cruz, you don't want him as president either, which would make sense as in, they mentioned, not now, they mentioned that, sorry, let me calm down and slow down. They brought up that we're playing with fire. However, if you look at all these characters, not one of these is an actual electable presidential candidate. I'll take yours.
Do you think that whoever the Democratic nominee is could beat Rubio in a general election?
Yes, I do. 100%. Just looking at comparing them, for example, Bernie Sanders, their civil rights movement compared to the Republicans' civil rights movement is increasingly higher. Bernie has even gone so far as walking in the March on Washington. A lot of these Republicans come from a history that's not so friendly to segregation or civil rights. Now, not now. Now to go back to why we think that Cruz and Trump being our candidates would make more sense, as they would lose, is also that neither of these candidates believe in global warming. We in Alaska should know best how global warming is affecting our ecosystem and our lifestyle, our jobs, the fisheries, everything that surrounds us is incredibly affected as a current. If you go to any glacier, you'll see the lapse in what has happened within 10 years is ginormous. So, blaming it on Chinese conspiracy and just disregarding it completely like Ted Cruz is, would completely just shows how inconsistent these presidential candidates would be. And so, for a Democrat, that's very advantage to us. Yes.
So your game plan for if one of these Republicans get elected is basically just it will never happen. What's your specific plan for the Democratic Party if one of these people doesn't win?
We want to the fact that as none of these people are actually supported fully by the Republican Party, none of these people would get anything passed. They wouldn't be able to last as a president. Not now. In fact, Cruz fooled the grassroots, which has now caused, in his defund Obamacare scam, which then caused the Republican Party to feel cheated, just like
say that you 100% believe that whoever the Democratic nominee was would be Rubio?
Yes. Why make it difficult when we can make it easy? Isn't that basically the American thing? Rubio is the better candidate, but he's not the best candidate. Do we really want an irreliable president, someone who can't even come up to the Senate to vote occasionally? Do we really want someone who's biased towards his own person, towards people who have more money? In that case, he would probably, if he weren't running himself, he would probably vote for Trump just because he's affluential with his money. No, you can't ask questions right now. And do we really want someone who can't bring together the Republican Party? You said that you could bring them together 100%, but you have given me no evidence of that. There has been no connection. He has not been able to push through a single reform that he has pushed within the within his term as Senate. He has not proven himself a worthy candidate.
We thank the deputy leader of the opposition. We now invite Leo Kiernan from Fallacy to open up the back half. Kiernan.
So in our name, fallacy, the first fallacy is spelled with a PH. It's actually more of a visual pun. So before I move to the construction material of my scheme, I'm going to go ahead and just frame the debate a bit, do some deconstruction, and then bring up the actual construction material that we have to offer you here on closing government. First, on the framing, we think that when we look at this, we need to establish a dichotomy between what it means to be a better candidate and what it means to be a better president. We hear from opening government that we hear about who makes a better candidate, like who's going to be more electable. And we hear from opening opposition that we hear about whoever's going to make a better president. Either way, we think we have a better framework. We think we can win on either framework. Now, second, we need to talk about the perspective that we're going to adopt when considering this motion. We think that the motion, when it tells us that we're asking who's going to make a better Republican candidate, we need to consider this from the perspective of Republicans.
Here.
We think it's absolutely crucial that they put someone up who can actually get elected, who actually will get elected, and we think that's most important. Alright, so moving into some of the deconstruction that we heard coming out of the opposition. They want to tell you that Marco Rubio never shows up to the Senate, that he's not voting on things. So in one of the most recent ones, in the big spending bill, he was told he abstained. Yes, he didn't vote, but it's not because he wasn't there. He was there, he was given the bill 48 hours before, and then said, I really can't come to a reasonable conclusion on the spending bill. I don't have enough time to consider it. He's doing the exact thing that we would want any candidate to do, not coming to a decision when he doesn't have enough information. Vote on those things, and we think that's a great thing. They also tell you, when we constantly bring up this point, that they're playing with fire when they want to put Cruz or Trump up there, they say it's okay, he won't get elected. Alright, but the thing is, even to the point that we don't think he can get elected, they're still telling you that there's a chance that he could get elected. And we think that Rubio presidency is much, much more survivable for the Democratic Party than either a Cruz or a Trump presidency. Now, two more things. One, in a POI, my partner told you that, or he asked, what happens if Rubio gets beaten? They said, well, it's okay, we'll beat him every time. Okay, fine then. Even under their idea of, who's going to win in the election, we can still put Rubio forward, and we can still have him be the best candidate because he still gets, beaten under their framework. We think that's perfectly okay. We think that even under, the framework of who makes a better candidate, considering what they want, we think Rubio is perfectly acceptable. The last thing is, they tell you that Rubio won't be able to get things passed, and they try and point to his lack of a record in any kind of Senate things. But we tell you, he will be able to get things passed. Look, we have a Republican Congress right now. That's totally why, Republicans are trying to go for the presidency. We think they can do it. But before we move to constructive, I'll take you.
But he's no one's first choice. Why would they want to put someone in office who no one even wanted initially?
polls, Rubio is much, much more favorable among Republicans than either Trump or Cruz. Trump isn't actually favorable. He just has a really, really loyal group of people. And so we think that people do want him. Secondly, he's proved in the past, he's saying that like people are able to work with him. So the Republican leadership would totally want him. He is people's first choice. He's the Republican leadership's first choice. All right. So now moving on to onto the actual material we're bringing you. We're going to be telling you, one, about how he makes a better president, and two, how he makes a better candidate. Under the president, which I'm going to cover first, we're going to talk about his how it's more survivable, and secondly, we're going to tell you about his tax policy and his foreign policy. So on it being more survivable, look, it's very, very easy to point to Trump and say, yeah, he would probably make a very awful president. And we think, as much as awful as the president says with him being an awful president, we think that's not something that the Democratic Party could really make it through. Or even with Cruz, we don't think it's really the kind of thing that the Democratic Party can make it through. When four of the 9 Supreme Court justices are in their late 70s, and the next president has like a big chance to appoint a lot of Supreme Court justices, we think it's unsurvivable for the Democratic Party for the next 20 years, or however long it is, until the Democratic Party can get more Supreme Court justices in there. We don't think that's survivable. We don't think that's a decent outcome for the Democratic Party if either Cruz or Trump becomes president. Now, secondly, onto the tax policy and the foreign policy. We've got Rubio, who puts forward an essay basically saying this is my vision for American foreign policy. It looks like walks off being carrying a big stick. And he basically tells you that, he wants to increase the size of the American military because of the fact that the world is safer when that happens. He doesn't say, we're going to go kick ISIS's ass. He doesn't say, oh, I want to see if the Middle East will glow. He actually how he does it. We think on foreign policy, Rubio is much preferable. Now, second, let's look at the tax policy. So on the tax policy, Rubio basically says, we'll tax between 50 and 35%, blah, 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 we'll do good things. And when we look at how that balances out the budget, well, it turns out with income tax, actually things are still balanced after the fact that Rubio gets his tax plan through. If we put Trump's tax plan in, we lose $10 trillion over the next decade. The deficit is going to just be blown out of the water, which is kind of amazing considering the fact that both Cruz and Trump have been railing against Obama for the current deficit. So we think that's valid. Now, I guess I'll bring up Cruz's tax plan. He wants to cut it to a 10% flat tax, abolish the IRS, and get a gold standard in. I'll leave that right there. Yeah. So why he makes a better candidate? So when we're talking about a candidate, even at the point that they don't get elected, we always consider the America that could have been. When we look back to 2008 in McCain, we see, yeah, actually we're pretty happy that McCain didn't get elected because then Sarah Palin would have been vice president. We're pretty happy about that. Romney, we see actually could have been a decent president. We think that fact that we're able to think about the America that could have been and that being a positive thing. We think that helps whatever party it was that didn't get elected. We think at the point that we put either Cruz or Trump forward, and we think about the America that could have been, we're like, thank God those guys didn't get elected. I'm so happy. But the point that Rubio's the nomination, we think that Americans actually will be happy at the point that, that people will think fondly of the America that could have been. It won't be a scary notion. We think for that reason, Rubio is a much preferable candidate to either Cruz or Trump. Secondly, we think of the fact that he's actually relatable to minorities. We'll get those people coming out to the election. We'll get new blood in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, which is absolutely essential at this point, considering that most of their voters are old white men. And we think we need new blood in the Republican Party. We think we need that. We think Rubio brings all those benefits to us. And so we're proud to stand here in proposition of Marco Rubio. Thank you.
We thank you, Senator Government, and now invite Ben Edwards from Team Astrophysics Go.
So let me rebuild the opposition's case here. Structured their arguments on this idea that Rubio is some kind of fresh new face for the Republican Party, but he is anything but. He is the establishment candidate. He is the masquerade for crony capitalism, the wolf in sheep's clothing. Their arguments are structured in these big hypotheticals and conjectures about where Rubio might succeed in the future. But what we have brought to you on the opposition is what we will bring to you is the evidence that actually exists, the candidates who are actually winning and building that more conservative base. Now, before I start today, I'm going to start with a few points of deconstruction. The House has consistently mentioned that this anti-establishment Republican Party as some kind of anomaly, like bizarre condition. But we don't see it that way. We see that as a strength of the Republican Party, the way in which we propel our candidates into office and actually get things done. Now, to prove this, I need to look no further than Ronald Reagan. All right, Reagan activated that core conservative base and was able to, with dramatic rhetoric and great things to say, patriotic things. And when he got into office, he actually enacted real Republican policies. Now, Rubio's problem is that he's not building this core foundation in the primaries. Instead, he's going to have to rely on these corporate and political obligations, which I will get more into later. And what we will get from that is a candidate in office who reflects more of the values of the status quo establishment rather than the true conservatives. Yes, please.
So two quick distinctions. One, Reagan actually had experience before he went on to be the presidency. Trump doesn't have that. Secondly, on Cruz not being an established candidate, he constantly talked about crony capitalism while flanked by his wife who works for Goldman Sachs.
I predicted that he might bring up that whole debacle about his Goldman Sachs, so I actually printed off. In response to these bizarre allegations, July 9th, 2012, he actually reported Goldman Sachs to the FEC. The House has claimed that Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president. The opening House did. I almost fell off my chair when I heard this. It is absolutely ridiculous. Article 2 of the Constitution says that no person except a natural-born citizen, except a citizen of the United States, shall be eligible for office of president. Now, the question here is what constitutes a natural-born citizen? Well, the Harvard Law Review defines a natural-born citizen as someone who is a U.S. citizen at birth with no need to go through naturalization proceeding at a later time. That is exactly what we have with Ted Cruz. Now, the House is also based a lot of their arguments on these hypotheticals. They say things like, Rubio's not winning right now, but he will win in the future because he's going to expand the base. But we need to remind the audience that the House does not have Elrond of Rivendell in the back. Guys, what is the mechanism that you guys are using to predict where Rubio will be in the future? Yes.
Polls.
Just today, the New Hampshire poll came out, and guess where Rubio was? Below Jeb Bush. Check it out. Now I will move on to my extension of our case. Now the opening opposition kind of touched on how Rubio is an establishment candidate. And we're going to expand on that premise in two ways. I will show you why it is important to have an anti-establishment candidate, and I will show you why our candidates fit that mantle better than Rubio. Now on the first issue, the thing I brought up earlier about Reagan reinforces this. Tearing down the faulty institutions that Jimmy Carter built up by 1980 is very comparable to having to tear down the faulty institutions that Obama built up by 2016. After each one of these lackluster Democratic presidencies, it becomes necessary and imperative for the Republicans to revolt against the establishment, not join them like with Rubio, and revive true conservative spirit. No, I gotta get it. It's from this time that we identify Rubio as the establishment poster boy, okay? Consistently through his Senate career, he has presidential run, he has had this love affair with U.S. sugar industry. Now, he's voted several times in federal subsidies for sugar industry and sugar quotas. Anybody who understands North American climate realizes that this is a terrible continent to grow sugar on. You know, the likes of Ohio, Louisiana, and Florida, coincidentally the home state of our dearest senator over here. I think the reason this is an important issue is because I don't think Republicans want a candidate in office who owes obligations to his sugar daddy. It's exactly this buddy-buddy relationship between corporation and government that has spoiled Republican politics for so long. maybe Rubio will do better in the future. No, we have the existing supporting data that comes out of Iowa, New Hampshire, and the national polling averages. And what that data says, Mr. Speaker, is that Cruz and Trump are winning. So that in itself indicates that Cruz and Trump are winning. Rubio is just going to rise above that. And then next, just the attacks against the sugar industry and accusing Rubio of being bought out by sugar companies or being owned by companies or whatever. I think it's a little odd, or I don't think it's odd that a candidate from Florida would support industry in his home state. That doesn't prove that he's owned by sugar companies. Yes?
Yes, but we're not talking about just Florida. We're talking about the entire U.S. So if he can't look to the entire U.S. to support them economically, why should he get the nomination for the rest of the U.S. that's not Florida?
Well, because right now he's a senator from Florida, so he supports Florida industry. Support industry in his home state. You don't think he's willing to support industry across the U.S. if he's elected president? Not right now. So this kind of leads into what are the three most important questions in this debate. The first one really is what makes a better candidate? We have conclusively proven that Marco Rubio is a better candidate for the Republican nomination presidency from both our framework and the framework that the opposition brought up in their first speeches. So, from the Republican standpoint, he brings new blood, he brings in minorities, and he just comes across altogether more reasonable than either Cruz or Trump. And if you're going from the opposition's framework that they brought up in their first speech about how they want Trump or Cruz because it'll be better for the Democrats, well, the thing is, they can't say for sure the Democrats are going to win the general election. And between those three candidates, the Rubio presidency is the one that's survivable by Democrats. Democrats will suffer far more under a Cruz or a Trump presidency than they will under a Rubio presidency. Rubio has at least shown he's willing to work with Democrats and work with others to, to actually make positive policy change. Then this leads into what makes a better president. Oh, and also on that, what makes a better candidate from the Republican standpoint, the
better candidate is the one who can actually win the general election, which Rubio can. The unfavorability ratings show that Trump and Cruz cannot. And then what makes a better president? We have conclusively shown also that Rubio will make a better president. We brought up all these policy issues that Rubio stands for, and the opposition accused us of just having kind of nebulous ideas, but we showed conclusively what kinds of policy changes he advocates. He's issued letters about what his foreign policy are going to be. He has a concrete tax plan, and the kind of bills he supported in the Senate and resolutions he supported in the Senate show what kind of policy he's going to support. And all of that policy he supports is better than the policy supported by Trump or Cruz. Just the fact that his economic plan actually has some merit and isn't just crazy by looking at the just general guidelines of it, I mean, that's just proof that he's going to be a better president overall. And then kind of linking into this, the third big question was really brought up in the last opposition speech about the establishment. Like, is the establishment bad? The opposition is advocating the establishment is bad and we can't support the establishment, we need to support the grassroots movement. But the establishment also stands for what the view of the Republican Party is. It's the Republican Party's image. And Rubio is better for the image of the Republican Party. Trump or Cruz, this brings into what the previous proposition speech brought up about the America that was. That's what the image of the Republican Party is going to be, the America that was. So if Rubio wins, it'll be better for the Republican Party's image because, again, we've shown that he actually has reasonable ideas. He actually is willing to work with others, and he's not crazy. I mean, which we think is a major just point. But if you take it from the Democratic point of view, the framework brought up in the opening opposition, if the Democrat were to win, Rubio is the candidate, then we can the Republican Party can look back at the America that could have been and say, Rubio is the guy we would have had. He has these reasonable ideas. America could have been so much better. America could have succeeded along these lines. When a candidate like Trump or Cruz is never going to have that kind of, never going to have that image in